So today we have Mihaela with us. So as our guest speaker, she joins us today to talk to us a little bit about leadership development for different groups. So there will be some interactive sessions as well. So we're going to do some breakout rooms a bit later on. But yeah, over to you, Mihaela, really, to sort of get us started on this really interesting topic.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope I didn't raise the bar too high with my sort of agenda. And I hope everybody's going to take something away. I'm really looking forward to sort of hearing and learning from you as well, because that's generally what happens in this kind of sessions. That's why we're part of this community, to learn from each other. I might have gone a little bit too sort of science heavy, and I hope that isn't going to be science, in the sense that I'm sharing a little bit too much, and I hope I'm not pitching to the converted in a sense. And if it is, you tell me, and I go through, and we focus on stuff that are really sort of adding value for you. Because it's always quite interesting. What I like to do when I do these sort of sessions, I generally like to speak to people in advance to kind of understand what they are, and just have that sort of conversation that provides a little bit more in-depth understanding of what's value, really. So yeah, with that out of the way, I think going to sort of look at what leadership and leadership development really is. It's a very stuffy area. It's, I don't know how many billions industry, and we're still not quite sure what leadership is, I suppose, but we're going to go through a conversation around that. I think I went a little bit too far with the framing and reframing, and but I'm going to provide, and hopefully that new for you, a couple of curveballs, sorry, the English terminology, curveballs in the conversation. And then we're going to look at what different stages really look like. And I'm pretty sure there is a lot of insight in the room as well. And as I'm a doctorate student on a professional doctorate program at Birkbeck, evidence-based HRM. I'm obviously going to use the stuff that are so the models that are more topical for me, i.e. The sort of evidence-based framework. And talking a little bit about what stood out for you, what would you take away, and what would you immediately sort of apply, if anything. And I hope there will be something. I have a bit of an introduction about myself, and then I'm really looking forward to hearing some sort of snippets and insights about you. I grew up in Bucharest, Romania. I graduated in nuclear chemistry, and I really wanted to become a researcher. However, life happened. So I ended up being a student and doing management. And then I came to London to learn English, and I came as a manager, and then I continued in sort of the operations path, and grew as an operational leader and manager, moved on to product and projects, and then became a corporate executive coach. I think the thread throughout my career has been the passion about supporting people become the best they can be in their roles, and understanding a little bit more about the organization and how the organizations work. And so since that was about 11 years ago, I sort of worked as a freelancer, sort of working with organizations in multiple industries as a coach, facilitator, and developing my skills as organizational leadership and people development professional. In a good fashion, I'm a curious person, so curiosity took me to learning a little bit more, and I went doing a master in organizational psychology, and now doing the doctorate I mentioned. So I think I'd like to think of myself as this person who isn't far from the business world, because I don't think learning too much without applying has value, or it might have, but not for me. For me, it makes more sense. I'm a person who likes to get things done. So I'm thinking of myself as a academic. So that's pretty much in a few words about me. And so now back to you. I'm not sure, Judith, Karen, Lauren, how you would like to do this. Maybe introducing each of us, just unmuting or using the messaging. I'm not quite sure what's the best option. Any suggestions?
Oh, Lauren, you're on mute.
There we go. Good start. Thank you. I think because there's quite a small group of us, we could probably get away with actually of saying our name, role, and yeah, leadership development responsibilities, etc. Because yeah, there's not too many people. So if people are happy to do that, I think that'd be quite nice.
I would appreciate it. It would be good to just, get to know each other. I suppose probably most of you know each other, but yeah, it would be just nice because we're gonna spend hopefully the next 70, 80 minutes together, and yeah, it would be nice. So who would like to start? And please nominate the next person. That would make it easier for the flow.
Shall I I'll kick us off. So my name's Lauren Tovey. So I work for Swindon Borough Council. My role in leadership and development. So I don't manage anyone or anything like that, but I do work in our learning and development team. So we do put on a lot of leadership and management programs. So I've been a part of sort of coordinating them sort of throughout my career, and also we do a lot around sort of management and leadership training, and also creation like of digital resources for them to sort of utilize as well. What I want to get out today, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier actually when you said it was like a multi-million pound industry, and so much investment goes into our managers and leaders, but something still doesn't always click into place and we don't always seem to always get it right. So I suppose just coming along and just sort of being inspired is kind of what I'm hoping to get from today. Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. No pressure, being inspired.
It's a big word, isn't it?
That sounds amazing. Thank you.
I'll nominate Caroline.
Hi everybody, I'm Caroline Allam and I am an organisational development specialist at Somerset Council. My role in leadership development is kind of input as opposed to output. We became a unitary council just over a year ago, so we had 5 organisations into one. And then 6 months later had to declare a financial emergency. So as you can imagine, there's a huge amount going on. Leadership and management development was always going to be high on the list, and it has come even higher up the list. So we are looking at the moment at redeveloping our programme. I am unlikely to be delivering it at my own request, but I'll be very involved in creating it and looking at the effectiveness of it and where we might adapt it, what needs to change, etc. So really today it's ideas. Are we on the right lines? Are we kind of going the route that other organizations are going? So it's just getting some ideas and so baselining, I suppose, for me. I'm sorry, I can't see anybody's name on the screen. So on the basis that I've got recording started by Judith, I'm going to nominate Judith.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Judy Vanderpump, OD consultant with Wiltshire Council, and along with my colleague, we run the leadership and management programme for the council. We're just about to start cohort 9, so we've got 48 of our aspiring and current managers just about to embark on the programme. It takes about 12 to 18 months, depending on how quickly they work through the programme. So very much involved with that, and I run a number of sessions on that around performance management and developing your leadership style and all of those sorts of programs, but we also use psychometrics very, very heavily across the organisation, have done for the last 6 years. And so we use them a lot throughout the leadership program so people can really start to understand their own leadership style, develop their self-awareness. So that's one part of my job. The other part of my job is anything to do with change, and also going in and working with dysfunctional teams. I was talking to my Mihaela earlier on, either the manager has identified some issues, sort of a toxic culture or, things like that, or the team are giving us indications that all is not well in that particular field. So a lot of my time is spent going in and working with teams, which I thoroughly enjoy. Yeah, and I suppose that the latest thing I've been doing is we're just about to appoint a new chief exec. So we're losing Terence, who's been fantastic, Terence Herbert. He's going to Surrey. And I did a range of psychometrics on all of the shortlisted candidates, which was fascinating. In the past, we've used an external company to do that, but this year we put our money where our mouth was, and yeah, we used the psychometrics internally, which is fantastic. So yes, that's me. So let me see. Let's move on to Kate. I nominate Kate.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kate Hardy. I work for a small charity, but we're a national charity called Butterfly Conservation. So not local authority. My role is head of people and culture, but I am actually finishing at the end of July, and in September I start a new role as organisational development and change specialist at New Forest District Council. So I am moving to the local authority world. So in terms of leadership development, I'm a qualified coach. I used to work in the NHS, and I spent a lot of years in the NHS, and I was a head of organisational development. So I've done quite a lot of leadership development programs, lots of coaching, MBTI and other bits and bobs like that, and as Judith was saying, things like the team development side of things I've really found interesting, where you try and bring a team together and develop them together. So I've done some of that as well, and I'm a little unsure of what my role exactly will look like going forward, given it's a new role in a transformation team, which is a new team as well. But I imagine, well, I know that leadership development is in there. I don't know in what kind of capacity I'll be working. And line management development. So so there'll be lots in my new role. And you talked about the science, Mihaela. I'm all for the science. So wow me with the latest research. I'd love to hear it. I need to nominate. I will nominate Michelle.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Michelle Fulford, and I'm a HR and change management consultant. So this is the first role I've had in a consultancy capacity. Typically before that I've been in-house, and HR change management has been part of a wider portfolio. So with HR, L&D, organisation design, development. So yeah, this is the first time I've been in an actual consultancy role, and I say the first time. I've been in it for 2 years and 7 months now, but the first 2 years being mainly focused in one organisation, which was a global organisation in medtech, and that was to help develop their change management capability. So key responsibilities were for just helping global teams to lead through change. So typically they're working with hospitals that are going through automation, AI and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of emotions with that type of change. So that was 18 months, and then since then it's been varied with different clients. So from a leadership point of view, the key focus I focus on at the moment is really just about helping leaders to manage change. Who've we left? Is it I can't read it either. I think it is it Barb.
Oh, sorry.
Have we heard from Barbara?
No, that's me. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Hi everyone. I'm along here with, I can see Curly, my colleague, on the call as well, so we'll probably do a bit of a joint joint thing. So Westmoreland and Furness Council, senior organisation development practitioner, a bit like you, Caroline, just been through local government reform as of 1st of April 2023. So leadership and management is a really big part of our culture development programme. So creating where we've got 4 organisations coming to one. So historically, I've run a few and developed a few leadership and management programs over probably the last 4 or 5 years, kind of different iterations, experimented with hierarchical ones and mixed groups, face-to-face on teams, qualified coach as well. So we're just, along with Kaylee, just in the process of developing an outline for a leadership and management programme for Westmoreland and Furness Council at the moment. So we just kind of picked in our ideas to SLT actually. So just come along to this for a bit of innovation, new ideas, inspiration, new thinking, see what we can add into it as well. And like a lot of you said, we do get involved in a lot of team development things, using different tools like MBTI, Jigsaw and things like that as well. So I'll hand over to Kaylee because she'll pick up on some of the things I've missed, Kaylee.
Hi, I'm Kaylee, and I don't think you've missed anything, Barbara, or I can't think of anything. But again, just hoping to get out of it is just around it's a new council for us, it's a new programme. Hopefully we can bring something new, bring in new ideas that we might not have used in our former councils and that kind of thing. So that's it really. And I'm an organisational development practitioner as well.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Yes, it feels like I'm going to probably learn more from you than you from me. And that's always a great thing. And I hope no pressure, Kate, around the latest science. Thank you so much for sharing. I think, yes, Joe.
Hello, that's quite all right. I just thought I'd introduce myself.
Oh,
if that's all
sorry.
right. No, don't worry. It was just to say kind of obviously good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Jo
Joe.
Pavey. I'm from BCP Council, so that's Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council on the South Coast, and I'm a business partner here. So the role that I do, I don't get as involved in kind of developing any of the leadership development and training, but that's more sits with our learning and development team. Although we're having a slightly oh, don't worry, Kaylee, that's fine. We're going through some changes at the moment, so that our team is likely to look quite different in the not too distant future. So I'm hoping, as part of my role as business partner, we'll be able to get out more into services and work with them on their leadership. But like other colleagues have said on the call, it's very much in its infancy at the moment. We're very much focusing on corporate director and director level currently, because it is very much work in progress. So then it'll be kind of that cascade effect. So yeah, here to kind of hear all about everyone's experiences, best practice, and get some creative ideas that I can then feed back to our team internally here. So thank you.
Brilliant. Sorry about that. I was thinking it's just you don't see everybody on the screen, and I was thinking we probably didn't go through everybody. Thank you for coming in and saving us.
No problem.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, absolutely, Michelle. Yeah, that's
I
what
realised I didn't say that, but
that's the purpose of this. I suppose the purpose of these networks, and I'm so grateful that I'm part of it. So yeah, do you still see my presentation?
yes.
Yeah, I disappeared from my screen. Yes. Oof.
We've got you.
Technology is trying to to give me a little bit of a challenge today. So okay, we were saying at the beginning that multi-billion pound industry, multi-million, whatever it, lots of money going into loads of models and loads of conversations around leadership. I think what we ought to do before we kind of embark on the next sort of hour of a conversation and exploration, I think it would be useful to sort of step back a little and think, some of you are more experienced and have sort of led like large programs, and probably you have already a bit of a very clear idea of what it means to you. Some of others haven't so much. But I'm pretty sure that in our roles, we have come up defining leadership a million times perhaps so far. So my question is to you, what does it mean to you particularly? What comes to mind when you hear leadership? And then I would very kindly ask you, Lauren, to split us in pairs after a couple of minutes so that you could interact in person, exchange your thoughts. I think that would be very useful. So if we kind of spend up to like 26 past thinking individually, reflecting, and then go for 5 minutes up to half past in pairs. Yeah. So what about the conversations, your conversations? How did they go? Does anyone want to sort of share and tell us what's come up for you in terms of leadership? What is leadership in your perspective?
Have we got Lauren? Is it
Yeah, I'm here.
Lauren? Have we lost Lauren? Oh, there's Lauren.
Oh, have we lost Lauren? Oh gosh.
No, I'm still here.
No, you're there. Oh, brilliant. You can use the chat room as well, the sort of the chat function to, to sort of share if you want, and if you want to, to sort of speak. That's
I
good as
don't
well.
mind speaking, but I felt I overtalked and poor Lauren didn't get to the end of her list. So Lauren, if you want to go first, please do.
I will do. So we talked a bit about how leaders are about inspiring people and guiding people in their team, sort of one common goal, and they're sort of sharing that vision with their teams, the organization, and it's about taking people on that journey with them and sort of sharing that journey rather than sort of doing things to people. We talked a lot about sort of building trust, supporting team members. We talked a bit about sort of a coaching approach, which is what Michelle went on to talk more about. So I'll let her sort of tell you a bit more about that one. But yes, I suppose it's about having that common vision. And for me, it's about sort of taking people on the journey with you. And that's what makes a really good leader. So yeah. Michelle, I don't know whether you wanted to talk a bit more about the coaching leadership that you were discussing.
And yeah, thank you, Lauren. I guess from my point of view, that's my preferred style of leadership, is that of a coach, but understanding that sometimes a more directive approach is needed. But for coaching, for me, that's always worked well because it helps improve other people's thinking. If you genuinely listen to understand their perspectives and understand where they're at and whether there's a need for any further intervention. So and it's that coaching with, I always use the expression, backbone and heart. So being able to do it in a way that is good intent, there's good intention. You've built, as Lauren said, the trust up so you can have that coaching conversation and then it be received in the right way, because it's done with the intention of developing and supporting them to, and like I say, think better.
Very, very similar to our conversation around taking people on a journey.
Yeah,
it's a shared experience, isn't it? It's with people. Yeah,
it's that co-creation, isn't it? Sometimes, yeah.
So Kate tells us about values and behaviors and vision and role modeling, and that's the how as well as the what. Less managing, more coaching. Thank you for that recommendation, Judith. Thank you. Anything else to add? Mindful of time as well. We have quite a bit to go through. Anything else to add that hasn't been said? Anyone from any other group? And it's
no,
really
the only
helpful.
thing I was and let's finish what you had planned, but I'd be interested if there's time at the end to hear from people if they see that's changed now as we're more to hybrid working, and whether leadership of remote teams has changed any of the dynamics at all. But planners, go through as you planned, but if there is time at the end, I'd be definitely interested to hear from everybody and how you're managing that.
Interesting. Am I correct into assuming that a lot of sort of the hybrid, managing around the hybrid space has been discussed in the last session. Is that right, Judith? Have you been to the last session?
I wasn't at the last session, so whether or not hybrid working was the focus, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it was about flexible working, and it was about so if we don't manage to end up talking a lot about that, probably we won't. I would strongly
it was
suggest
more leadership of remote teams.
Oh,
but anyway,
yeah. Okay. We'll see how we're getting on. Absolutely. Okay. Managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. Yeah, I love that one. Kate, yes?
I was just going to say, I think the context is really important, because it's, the situational leadership, I think, is key. Because if you think about leadership during COVID, I think that was different to leadership that perhaps in a normal situation. So in some circumstances, I was in the NHS at the time, there was a requirement for leaders to be actually really quite directive. And I think that was probably right, because they had to get some stuff done and they had to get it done quickly. So they had to inspire people and really direct people quite quickly. And actually, in some contexts, I think there's a bit of a hangover that we've been left with as a result of that. So people can't now get out of that directive approach and need to adapt to what much more, a coaching approach in terms of leadership style. And so changing back is, some people are finding, quite challenging. So it's about being able to adapt, I think, to that context.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so complex, isn't it? For our world is very complex. Our world of work is very complex. Our world is very complex. So obviously, anything that sort of supports us in our roles, and anyone will need to kind of make sense of complexity in a way that it's helpful. And talking about derailing behaviors, that's very easy to sort of, it's a very fine line basically to walk through. Any other thoughts?
I think it is about maximizing potential. The leader's role, the manager's role is to be able to draw out the best in all individuals within the team. That for me is fundamental to their role, and we've all worked for people that are very, very good at that. And equally, we've worked for people that really aren't, and certainly within our organisation we can see those leaders and managers that do that exceptionally well, and people want to go and work in their team.
If we could replicate this, is it about traits? Is it about their behavior? There's so many different questions. And yes, this is where we are. It's very hard to actually have a clear representation, because it's all about the context, to your point, Kate. In different times, there are loads of models, and you very wisely have shared names of some of the models. So I didn't actually go through any of the models, because I kind of thought that it's a bit assumed. And if anyone is interested in all the different types of models, there's some resources I can share. But yes, absolutely. Throughout time, people have tried to ascribe the greatest qualities of the leader, to sort of describe that the leader has traits, the leader has behaviors. So there were always, models that ended up finding the right list of things. And anyway, the truth is that it's so dependent. So some of the theories that I'm more sort of leaning towards, and I think they make more sense in our actual life where it's so complex, is this idea of the leader, manager, the sort of the leader follower, it's called. So basically it's about exactly what we were saying about making sense in the context, leader follower exchange theory, they call it. And then there are other, in different contexts, obviously crisis management, you mentioned, Kate, absolutely, that there are certain traits that are really useful, and there's certain ways that sort of the business situation needs to be approached in a certain way, and we need to apply certain strengths and certain capability in that context. Overall, talking about what leadership is, and generally as a definition, there is no clear definition. We all have a sense of what works because of our experience. But then even that, it could be, there is a question to ask whether it's a bit biased, because obviously we function in a certain context, in a certain culture with certain preferences. And I'm going to speak about that in a second. Anyway, Thomas, Martin, and Riggio have kind of suggested that after they've done sort of a systematic review of the various definitions of leadership, they suggested that the predominant theme is that leaders are influencers, and they do that via motivation and enablement rather than coercion. And everything you said, it's there as well. So we're on the right track. Now, I wanted to again, as I said, throw a curveball, and the next slide contains a very interesting take on leadership and all that has been said about leadership. It's a study that came up, came out, if you want, this year. Haslam et al. I'm not sure if you heard about it, the zombie leadership concept. Have you heard? It's been on social media shared. So, but I think in many ways, it kind of tells us how this tendency of distilling and simplifying the complex, because I think, copied this idea, but I feel the same, and I identified and resonated with the thought that it's because we have a psychological need to simplify the complex, and so then we created all these different things, hoping that they're gonna be the one panacea, the one-stop shop for solving all our leadership convention problems. So what they say that in their sort of paper, they tell us it more, for them it's creating awareness, explaining to us that this is what's out there and is not particularly helpful. And what they say as well, they look at the idea of the elitist sort of vision, in the sense that people who have had sort of the voice to voice their thinking, they are the ones that shaped our thinking in some ways, and they kind of they want to highlight and they want to increase awareness for us, especially people who are developing other leaders, to kind of think, where do we want to get the next generation of leadership to? Do we want to repeat what has happened, or do we want to do things differently? And if we are to do things differently, what might that end stage look like basically? So they give 8 reasons of zombie leadership. So basically things that we truly believe they are true, but they aren't. Talking about evidence-based, the leadership, it's all about leaders. This heroic leadership we have developed, the one person that saves the day, which obviously we don't believe in that as a group of 40 people, which is great. But generally speaking, there is a lot of that narrative in our businesses, and that is the reality. Many businesses are still operating from that perspective. And no, it's not about the leader themselves. We need followers, we need people to engage with. They make sense of how we show up, and leadership is in the context of how they perceive we're doing, basically, as a group whom we are aiming to lead. The zombie reason number 2 is there are specific qualities that all great leaders have. Again, we spoke about that. That's not true either. So it's important to kind of challenge our sort of perspectives, I suppose, when we develop programs or solutions. Just think, what's the list, or what's the model, or what influences our work, basically. What matters really is it's how people perceive these qualities. It's not about the qualities per se. I hope that makes sense. There are specific things that all leaders do, yes and no. It's again, it depends on the circumstances. So in a crisis situation, you probably need someone who's a bit more directive and clear in their communication. Whereas when you want to develop people, you need a different approach. We all know a great leader when we see one. Well, we're biased. So obviously, if we all believe that certain, human with certain characteristics, it's the person that we need to follow, then obviously we will believe that. But if we're in different contexts, different cultures, we probably have different perspectives on what that looks like. The fifth one is all leadership is the same. Well, there isn't. What leadership looks like generally changes, and yeah, we kept saying this, that it changes in context. So you were absolutely right in everything you said earlier. Number 6, leadership is special. It's a special skill limited to special people. That's the elitist sort of idea that they were highlighting in their paper. And leadership, it's always good, and it's always good for everyone. No, we know lots of unethical leaders who have done lots of bad things for their teams and organizations. We have so many different examples currently from even more public spaces. So no, that's not true. They could support inequality and even tyranny. People can't cope with our leaders. No, that's not true. They could actually undermine team effort in certain circumstances, because if their behaviors, to your point, Judith, where we have a lot of deviance, people disengage, no, they don't add value. They literally undermine the business, the organization, and everything around. So anyway, does this kind of resonate with you? Yeah, have you seen similar things before?
Some of it does. Yeah, some of it resonates, not all of it for me.
Yeah.
I know Google did. They're always chucking lots of money at things like leadership and managers, and they did Project Oxygen, didn't they, a few years ago, where they spent an inordinate sum of money looking at, do we actually need leaders and managers? Because a lot of people working at Google have got brains the size of the planet and probably can sort of, self-manage. But actually, after throwing an inordinate sum of money at it, they did find out quite clearly that where you have a good manager or leader, it can make a huge difference on the performance of that team. Equally, where you've got a bad manager, as you rightly say, it can have a huge impact to the contrary. So it's quite useful looking at that Project Oxygen stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very good mention. There is a lot of information, and yes, there are some really good pieces of work out there. Thank you, Judith. So on the back of that, and talking about what we know generally about leadership and what could help us, there are, as you said, leaders do matter for growth, especially. And the organizations and nations as well. That's one paper that kind of Johnson Olcon 2005 that have suggested that. But also there is another sort of study. It's called the Globe Leadership Study. Familiar with it? It's quite popular. No? Okay. So this one looked at, so engaged 17,300 middle managers in 19 organizations across the globe, and actually looked at how their cultural values affect their views of leadership. And the conclusion was, it's a bit what we were saying around the context, that for certain countries, there are certain sort of characteristics and values that are more important than for others. For instance, in countries like Germanic countries, that being more autonomous as a leader. It's more important than in other countries. The opposite of this could be considered sort of more Latin countries. They're a little bit more collectivistic in their thinking. And so there is another piece of work actually talking about resources. I'm going to put it on the list that I'm going to send tomorrow. Is Erin Meyer talking about cultures, apart from the globe study. Is Erin Meyer familiar with her work? No. So she's as well kind of trying to, in a way, simplify, but gives a little bit of an understanding. So for people who are working on with global teams, or with people who are from different areas, perhaps not so much the group here, but if you do get the need to work with global teams, yeah, she kind of suggests how to communicate in sort of more global context to understand our different preferences based on, wherever we grew up and what kind of mental models we have from there. So leadership is socially constructed. We said that. And another terminology used in the leadership theory world is this idea of implicit leadership theories. So the idea of, and that's when I did the leadership model at the masters, it kind of sort of stayed with me, this idea of leadership, it's in the eye of the beholder, because it's really true. So many things are in the eye of the beholder, but especially leadership more than anything. So this is based on this theory, implicit leadership theory, where we're actually creating implicit schemas. So basically we have in our unconscious, we grew up and we create a model of, what certain things need to look like. And basically we associate leadership with masculine traits based on Eagley and Corral sort of work on gendered organizations. They have clearly demonstrated that what we believe as being leadership, it's generally masculine traits, and probably relates to this. And at the same time, the same bias kind of makes us ascribe leadership characteristics to one person. So basically, if we see someone who is assertive, then we would assume that they have all the other characteristics that come with assertiveness. Driven, competitive, so on and so forth. More or less. I mean, some of us are more aware than others. I'm not dismissing that, but generally speaking, that's what the data kind of suggests. All is not lost. A Gallup poll has kind of suggested throughout time that, in terms of the findings from sort of the bias towards masculine traits, we're kind of changing these perceptions, but we're far away from being where we need to be. Anyway, this was more like a fun facts more than anything, or a little bit of a colorful graph, because I use so many words. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on this? Anything new? Any reflections?
Well, I love that graph. I mean, obviously, people would prefer female bosses, wouldn't they? Because, no, I jest, but that's good to see. That is good to see. And I'm sure there's got to be some element of emotional intelligence there, and just, I don't know, a more sensitive, empathetic approach, coupled with that ability to be assertive when required. So I think that's really good.
Yeah. It's obviously, taken with a pinch of salt. This, I'm sure that certain countries, this is kind of aggregate data. I'm pretty sure that certain countries have different pictures, but it's quite nice to see, as you say.
Going in the right direction.
Well, apparently for gender equality, we have another 300 years. So
exactly.
I don't know who's done this. I know where this data is, but it's I'm sure I heard it very recently that we're on a trajectory of 300 years. So, yes, I will share the models. Okay. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Any other thoughts? Yeah. Is it helpful? Michelle, I think you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I said I'm probably being an idealist. I would prefer there to be a line, just a straight line, rather than and there'd be no difference between men or women.
Yeah, well, they kind of converge because when they started in the 50s, I think they started in 1953 doing the polls.
Yeah.
So when they started in the 50s, that it was a massive gap. So then
Yeah,
now we
for
kind
sure.
of we're getting closer. So
Yeah,
interesting.
it's good
Okay,
picture. Good picture.
thank you. So yes, Kate, I was
I
about
was
to
just
ask
gonna
you, is it a British interesting or is it true interesting? Sorry.
true interesting. I was just thinking that in the night, it's about what you know, isn't it, rather than potentially what you prefer. Because in the 1950s, there probably wasn't very many women bosses, as it were. So therefore,
Absolutely.
they don't know what it's like to have a woman boss. So,
Yeah.
so the preference would potentially automatically be a man. But it's interesting that, you know, well, I'm pleased that it's converging, and it shouldn't make any difference. It's nearly there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think it's about what you know and what you don't know. And if people
Yeah.
don't know something, then they would prefer the other thing that they do know.
Sure, absolutely. Makes total sense. And it's quite interesting how no preference has kind of lowered as well. But I suppose, yeah, going with female preference might sort of overlap a little bit. But yeah, very good point. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Any other thoughts?
That's good.
Thank you. So we were talking about managers and leaders earlier. I kept hearing sort of the difference, and I'm gonna let you go on a chit chat in pairs around yeah, managers and leaders. Are leaders managers and managers are leaders? It's a sort of game of words here. Is there any difference? Should there be any difference when we sort of support people develop in their sort of leadership skills or line management skills? Or what are we looking what are we looking for? How we approach it? How do you do that in, because obviously some of you would have more experience than others. It's just, just if you haven't sort of participated in any of the programs so far as such, what do you see in your organization? What do you observe? And yeah, just thoughts around these ideas of leadership management and how do they get supported? How do we approach it for people at different levels? Because obviously we all have a sense that more senior leaders need perhaps different type of support than more junior. How do we do that? How did it go? Let's just have one person, two people sharing very shortly. And if we can get more people sharing in the chat, what did you come up with?
Sorry, I'll have to go. I was with Kaylee again, which was lovely to talk through things with her. And actually, we'd had similar experiences previously, but we had slightly different views on which makes for a good conversation on, are all leaders managers and all managers leaders? My view is that they're very different, and I described it as leaders being visionary and managers being operational, and that actually you're born a leader. It's not something you can learn. You can practice it, but it's not something you can learn. Whereas managers, you can be trained. You can learn the skills to be an operational manager. But so mine was really kind of a very closed view on it, and that's personal. And Kaylee's was much more open than mine was.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, that's richness there. Having sort of views in different parts of the spectrum. Interesting. Any other thoughts?
I think not around the whether they're born or We just said the same, really, you know, visionary rather than transactional or operational. With my change management head, I was thinking perhaps managers do more incremental change where leaders do transformational change. I didn't know if there wasn't something around innovation, you know, whether managers are more, perhaps more, leaders are perhaps more inclined to be innovative rather than, you know, perhaps just doing, perhaps, like I say, incremental changes. So, and I think is that was the main thing we were talking about, Lauren?
I think so. Yeah, we sort of described it as one was sort of more transactional, like you said, and one was more transformational. And that was the leader, that was more transformational. That was kind of what we said in a nutshell. We did obviously talk more about, you know, what it means to be a manager and a leader. We talked a bit about there are some similarities there, but equally there are big differences between the two as well.
Vision versus process, I think we summed it up.
Yeah.
Interesting. Can I share my own? It's a very personal view. I think because I've been a manager, and the people I worked with throughout time, if you ask them, I don't think they call themselves managers or leaders. I think, you know, going back to the whole theory, conversation, I think maybe we kind of romanticized all this idea of over romanticized this idea of leadership. Because at the end of the day, people who are eventually leading organizations, they won't be able to lead organizations if they didn't have management skills. That's just my perspective. You need them both. It's absolutely impossible to sort of, and to the point of leaders are being born. That's kind of, I mean, it's debatable because generally our genetics are about 30%. The rest of it, its influence is you can develop sort of managing emotions that can be developed, you know, going into self-awareness, emotional intelligence, improving relationships with others. All these sort of what we would call leadership, more like leadership traits. You can improve, you know, how you're perceived by others. Again, it's a context. Once you understand, people work together so that we improve how we work better together. So it's debatable. So we have, my feeling is that leadership and management is merging. Yeah, I agree with that, Kate. People-centered. We talk about inclusion, how we need to move forward to focusing on getting the best of our individuals. Yeah. So it is about what you're trying to achieve. And I think both sort of approaches or mindsets, if you want. Whereas your manager would be more around organizing, controlling. If we want to have a business, we really need these kind of skills in our leaders, because otherwise we won't have a business. So anyway, it's just throwing it out there. So different level, different needs. So that the conversation leads itself into. Again, it's what's the context, what does the context need? And, you know, as Kate said, we're aiming towards, nowadays there are all these conversations from different type of inclusive leadership, human leadership, all sorts of different, more integrated sort of approaches to leadership and management. However, I would suggest that at the basis, management is required, because that's what, you know, that's what we need. That's the hard skill of leadership, if you want. I don't know if that's still allowed to be called that way, because I know there are preferences where people don't, they have something against using the hard and soft skill metaphor. So I suppose it's about what you want to achieve, what does the organization wants to achieve, and how you align what you're doing with what the organization needs. So the organization and people strategy really need to be clear. and alongside vision and how what does that look like and how you achieve that. Many organizations, there is not a lot of sort of data to back up this usefulness or not usefulness, this effectiveness, if you want, of employee value proposition. But almost every organization I worked with, and almost every organization these days, it's using this as a way of making a statement on how do they want to add value. So there is a paper that I'm going to share with you around the different type of leadership development, as in development for what. So what are you trying to develop people for? To be directors, to be CEOs? Are you developing them for an immediate need? Do they need a special a specific skill that has been identified? So yeah, there's this plethora of, sometimes we think in terms of like big programs or, big transformations, to go back to, the leadership is more about transforming. But sometimes, it's still leadership development when they need to make sure that people are able to read their P&Ls. So yeah, it's part of the parcel, so to speak. So we look at individual teams, and the context are very important, and always systematic approach works. And we discussed earlier about co-creating. It's always important to involve people. There is always a reason tapping into the motivation of people. It's sure to support and help. So that's the paper I was mentioning around. I'm going to share this. It's a lot written there, but basically they're looking at the different levels, and perhaps management, controlling and organizing, perhaps that is not a complex skill, whereas collective leadership, human leadership, this is more complex, and then it's harder, to your point, I suppose, Caroline, it's harder to sort of pinpoint, and it's more complex to develop because it's a more complex sort of set of skills. But at the same time, there is UCL, if interested in, it has written a whole textbook around leadership development, and there is an idea around different types of skills that need developed for leadership, and at different levels we need it's to flex a little bit. So they look at clusters, the conceptual, interpersonal, and technical skills. Again, I can send you links, and you can capture this if interested to delve a little bit more into. So the whole idea is that obviously at lower levels, entry levels into management and leadership, you require more technical, as you said, you're more operational, but equally you still need some conceptual skills, you still need some interpersonal skills, because you in context, you're working with other people very often. I mean, sometimes you are sometimes people could be in independent how do you call it, individual contributors, and they probably have, if you're a tech person who develops code and it's in a bubble, perhaps you don't have that much interaction with other people, but even in that context, you're still part of the wider system. And yeah, we're social humans, so I suppose most of the time we're interacting with each other. So a level, especially when you become responsible for tasks or people, but if it's only tasks, you still need to report to interact with someone, I would imagine. I haven't seen anyone working totally in isolation. So yeah, they kind of suggest that that we flex these skills as we move through different roles and different areas. Does that make sense? Have you seen this model before?
No.
No. Okay.
I don't think you're sharing a slide. Are we looking at a slide? I can't see a slide.
Oh, it's only me seeing the slides?
No, I
don't know
can
if
see
anyone
the
else can.
slide.
Oh,
I can see it.
oh, it must be me.
Oh, sorry. I'm
No, it must be me, Michaela. Sorry, if everyone else can see it, must be my team.
Don't worry, I'm trying again.
I'll go out and come back in. I'll go out and come back in.
Okay. Okay. So do you see it now? Because I just
Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Okay, so that's a few models. There's so much information in this area, as you well know and you could appreciate. I hope that all these things I'm sharing are adding a little bit of value. So now talking about more perspective, from a more practitioner sort of perspective, if you want. So Corporate Research Forum, they have it's an organization that it's like a membership organization, and their members are HR, generally HROD people senior, so you've got to be at the very senior level to be part of their membership list. And they very often, like all other big consulting companies, but they're more evidence-based, so they tend to sort of employ a more evidence-based approach. They're trying to look at more quality data. They have more robust ways of analyzing the information. So I chose this paper because it's kind of showing a little bit, and I can share it as well. It's kind of showing a little bit more sort of a transition from how we were doing things in the past to what's kind of emerging. And I've seen some of the things that they came up with here. I've seen them in my with the clients I worked with more recently. So they say that like a number of trends, things such as outside-in thinking, adaptive strategy development, which is anchored to purpose. They need to be more adaptable. Leaders need to be more adaptable and responsive. They need to make sense of complexity. We spoke about that. We live in highly ambiguous times. Also, they said about leading in the age of activism, which kind of resonates if we look at the sort of general political landscape. Building capacity for agile execution, develop a culture of learning and experimentation. Things that I've heard a bit earlier that some of you have tried to work with different ways of approaching development, and we work in contexts, and absolutely very timely, I would say, having this experimental mindset. So apparently they're saying, and I observed that as well with few large businesses that I worked with, banking, utilities, they tend to sort of move away from these complex leadership models, where we had all these competency frameworks, and they were all stuffy with like, I don't know how many items on the 360 reviews, so on and so forth. They tend to move now more onto the realm of naming behaviors and mindsets, and kind of using and principles, overall principles, whether they're value-based, generally value-based, and sort of anchored into the vision and mission of the organization. And yeah, they're trying to be a little bit more agile by doing so. So I don't know if this is something that could sort of influence the way you're thinking going back into your teams. But that's what they observed, and as I said, I kind of observed as well with a few organizations. Now it depends, because it doesn't, this kind of in the consulting world, they use a lot the sort of the idea of maturity levels. I don't know if you do use that. I didn't find, and I didn't bring it up because I didn't find a lot of that. That was a challenge for me to find some, sort of more peer-reviewed literature on this, but doesn't quite exist. However, it kind of makes sense. I mean, we take things from, at least we assess what level we're at, and probably in OD we do that when we kind of diagnose, or we do assessments to find out where people and the organization, the teams are at, when you do like an organization-wide assessment. So yeah, it's the idea of finding out where it works, because it's not going to work everywhere. Absolutely. So we talked about quite a bit. I'm mindful of time. Do we still have about 10 minutes max, or shall I push the accelerator? Do you have about 10 minutes?
Well, we have 6 minutes actually.
6 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So at the entry level, I would suggest we kind of covered the idea that management technical skills are really important. What I observed, and when I was speaking to Leah, I was actually sort of came to mind this idea of perhaps engaging with, I mean, I suppose you have sort of all sorts of apprenticeship schemes, maybe engaging with more formal development for entry levels if it's feasible. But they tend to kind of have this more experiential sort of approach to learning, on the job learning, all that sort of stuff that are actually quite useful because it doesn't happen overnight. And obviously, the more senior you are, the more that you have other type of challenges, because the more senior you are, you have your own sort of habits that, as Judith was sort of suggesting earlier, are not always the best habits. So sometimes we really need to work. So the higher we go, we need to work with behaviors more than anything. But then the CMI was saying that 85% of current leaders, managers are called accidental managers. They have no training. 85% is a huge amount. They have no formal training, and they landed roles leading other people. And that's quite, yeah, I think it's a bit sobering. So yeah, technology important to be used as well. The context, in context, co-creating. There is this idea of using design thinking. Lots of organizations are using that approach. I don't know if you're familiar with the process, but it's basically ensuring that a lot of research and sort of the discovery phase is quite robust, and you engage as many people and data as possible. And yeah, needs to be made relevant to their role. Yeah, using storytelling, it's a very popular sort of approach more recently, where leaders lead as role models with their own stories, and that's quite engaging. Motivational theories, behavioral science, very important to actually look at what actually works. And we were talking in our group a bit earlier about people who don't sign up to come to programs. Maybe, but perhaps it's useful to have these individual conversations through other mediums and mechanisms, performance or whatever other um, 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 tools we use in the business, and find out what's going on for them. Um, why aren't they motivated? Because there is always a reason. At a human level, there is always a reason. They might first fear something. There's always a reason. Really important as well to have anything you do. It has to have sort of sponsorship from the exco or the higher level, because if you want to go onto a journey of developing leaders in the organization, it's really important that strategies are aligned and people are supporting you. And evidence-based approach, I'm not going to go through, I'm going to send you the infographics, but because I would like a couple of minutes as well to sort of get a bit of insights. What did you learn and what are you going to do going forward? But generally speaking, the evidence-based approach is really using multiple sources of evidence and ensuring that you are sort of being as thorough as possible so that you make the best possible decision. It doesn't have to be very intense, work intense, but it's useful to make sure that when you are planning anything, you are getting multiple sources taken into account, and then you utilize a method to analyze the data. So basically, it's scientific literature, professional expertise, organizational data, stakeholders' views. Organizational data, stakeholder views are the kind of stuff that they can overlap. So that things like interviews, your reports, customer information, focus groups, whatever could help you gain information and use it in the development of your program. Professional expertise, it's your peers, groups like these. Scientific literature, we tend to support the idea of using sort of thorough, peer-reviewed, trustworthy sort of sources. I'm going to send you the link of the Center of Evidence-Based Management. They have a little bit more information there, and if you're interested, that would work. And as a process, I'll send you this infographic as well. So it's basically going through a series. Once you get all the data from all these different sources, then you go through a process of validating. You know, some of the things are going to make sense, some of the things aren't going to make sense, but the whole point is to adapt it to your own environment. And then measuring, it's really important to ensure that, you know, you started with the end in mind and you kind of got somewhere there. And a good balance of, while you engage your stakeholder, you're always going to have insights and people are going to tell you what's important to them. So it's good to have a good balance between what you think is important and what they think is important. And I'm there. I hope it didn't feel a bit rushed at the end.
Apologies, Mihaela, I have to go to another meeting, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
So yeah, one word, anything you learned that it would help you, and yeah, any thoughts for me? Mindful, it's already 31, so.
I love the slide on the zombie elements of that, because just as a tool to generate some really interesting discussions for people coming onto the leadership program is brilliant. Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of your thoughts around where leadership is possibly heading, and a blurring of hierarchy, because I like that hive mind approach. You know, we've got 5,000 brains in Wiltshire Council, and sometimes we assume that the biggest brains are at the top of the organisation. So we are very, very hot now on co-production and stakeholder panels and such like, because otherwise what a waste. So I do think we're at a real pivotal moment in leadership, especially with the advent of AI. I think things will start to look quite different. But thank you. It was really, really, really interesting, Mihaela. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.